Economic development and growth are interlinked. While growth is possible without development, because growth is simply an increase in real GDP, economic development cannot take place if there is no growth. In fact, economic development is far more comprehensive as an idea than economic growth, because in economic development we are not only looking at a rise in real output, it may also involve looking at the composition of this output and a consequent shift in the allocation of resources, as well as any reduction of poverty, inequality, and unemployment. Furthermore, economic development may also entail what we call availability of education and literacy rates, as well as health and life expectancy. A major development economist, Amartya Sen, in fact, stated that development is about creating freedom for people and removing obstacles to greater freedom. He also argued that greater freedom will therefore result in people to choose their own destiny. And these obstacles to freedom and hence development may include poverty, lack of economic opportunities, corruption, poor governance, lack of education, and lack of health. Hence, development requires that there should be lower poverty, more of economic opportunities provided to people so that there could be an upward mobility. The corruption in a country should be low, and the governance should be strong in terms of law and order and legal system and so on. And then there should be education and healthcare provided to everyone, irrespective of their ability to pay. When we look at the classification of economies in terms of their level of development, we come to basically three categorization, which is done by the United Nations. But before we talk about that, the criteria for evaluating a country's level of development can be on the basis of the GDP per capita, or for example the level of industrialization, the general standard of living, and the amount of technological infrastructure. When we look at United Nations classification, they say they could be developed countries, which are those which have very high level of economic growth and security. Then comes the transitional countries, which are those which are in the process of moving from centrally planned economy to a mixed or free market economy, which means they are in the process of becoming more developed, because they will follow what we call free market practices that will allow the markets to operate more freely, and there will be more efficiency and therefore a possibility of a higher living standard. Then comes our developing countries. Developing countries are countries which are categorized by low GDP per capita, and normally they rely on agricultural sector as the primary source of income. And such countries may not have high level of industrialization. They may have a lower technological infrastructure, and also there could be lack of institution in these countries. Another classification that we look at is in terms of the level of national income. The World Bank assigns the world's economies to four income groups: the low, the lower middle, the upper middle, and high income countries. When we look at this classification, the high income countries have a GDP of more than almost $12,500. The upper middle income economies have a GDP that lies between $4,000 to $12,500, while lower middle will be in the range of $1,000 to $4,000, and the low income comes in the range of less than $1,000. So when you look at some countries that are high income, Austria, Bermuda, Chile, Norway, Qatar, Seychelles, South Korea come into this category. While when we look at a lower middle, Pakistan, for example, comes in this category with a GDP per capita roughly of $3,000. When we look at our low income countries, the low income countries are Afghanistan, Ethiopia, some countries in Africa, where the income level is less than $1,000. And clearly these are the countries that are in the range where they are struggling in terms of standard of living and GDP per capita.